The cold winds of space carried no sound as the Zilani ships waited at the edge of the solar system. Commander Vexitar stood on the bridge of his flagship, his four eyes focused on the screens that showed the third planet from the yellow star. The blue and white world spun slowly in the darkness, its surface covered with patches of ice and water. "Another frozen world," he said to his crew. "The scans show primitive life forms struggling to survive on the surface." The Zilani had been watching hundreds of worlds like this one for many years. Most species that lived on ice worlds were simple creatures that spent their time trying to find food and stay warm. They built basic tools and lived in small groups. Very few ever made it to space travel. Dr. Telana, the science officer, looked up from her instruments. "Sir, I am detecting movement on the surface. There are large vessels breaking through the ice in the northern regions." Vextar nodded. This was normal for ice world species. They always tried to break through the frozen surface to reach the water underneath. Some used it for drinking, others for fishing. It was a sign that these creatures were at least smart, enough to use tools. "How many vessels?" he asked. 12 large ones, sir. They appear to be using some kind of heating technology to melt the ice. The energy readings are higher than expected for a primitive species." Vextar was mildly interested. Sometimes ice world species developed better technology than others. It helped them survive in their harsh environment. He made a note in his report to the Galactic Council. Far below on the planet's surface, Captain Jake Morrison wiped the frost from his face mask and looked out at the white landscape. The Arctic wind howled around the massive mining platform called Arctic Dawn. The ship was as long as 3 football fields and covered in heavy machinery that cut through the ice like it was soft butter. "Lisa, how deep are we now?" he called. To his engineer, Lisa Park checked her instruments. 200 feet, Captain. The ice is thicker here than we expected, but the thermal cutters are working fine." Jake nodded and walked to the edge of the platform. Below them, the ice glowed orange from the heat of their cutting tools. Steam rose into the cold air as millions of gallons of ice turned to water and then to vapor. The sound of the machinery was so loud that the crew had to wear ear protection. "Sam, what do you see down there?" Jake asked the geologist. Sam Carter was looking at a screen that showed what lay beneath the ice. "The mineral deposits are incredible, Captain. I've never seen readings like this. There's enough rare earth metals down there to power half the planet." Jake smiled. This was exactly what the International Mining Consortium had hoped to find. The Arctic was full of resources that the world needed for technology and energy. The ice was just something that got in the way. Back in space, Commander Vextar was reading the detailed scans of the planet. The primitive species seemed to have spread across most of the world's surface. They had built cities and roads and even had some basic aircraft. But what caught his attention were the vessels breaking through the ice. "These icebreakers are larger than normal," he told Telana. "Most primitive species use small boats or simple tools. These vessels are quite sophisticated." Telana nodded. "They seem to have developed advanced heating technology. The energy output is impressive for a species at their level." Vextar made another note. "They are more advanced ice miners than most. This is likely how they survive in such a harsh environment. The Galactic Council will want to know about their adaptation techniques." The commander classified the species as Tier 7 on the Galactic Development Scale. This meant they were barely capable of space travel and posed no threat to other worlds. They were simply another ice world species doing what they had to do to survive. On Earth, Jake Morrison's crew continued their work through the long Arctic day. The platform's massive drills punched through the ice and into the rock below. They were looking for deposits of lithium, cobalt, and rare earth metals that were essential for making computers, phones, and electric car batteries. "Captain, we're hitting the main deposit now," Lisa called out. "The automated systems are working perfectly." Jake watched as robotic arms began pulling chunks of ore from the deep holes. The mining operation was so efficient that they could extract tons of material in just a few hours. The ice that had taken thousands of years to form was being melted away in minutes. "How much can we process today?" he asked. "At this rate, we can fill the cargo holds by tomorrow morning," Sam replied. "Then we can move to the next site." High above them, the Zilani continued their observations. Commander Vextar was preparing his report for the Galactic Council. He would tell them about another ice world species that had learned to survive by mining through the frozen surface of their planet. It was a common story in the galaxy. "Shall we move closer for better observations?" Telana asked. "No need," Vextar replied. "We have seen enough. These creatures are simply advanced ice miners. They pose no threat and offer nothing of interest to the Council. We will maintain our distance and complete our standard observations." The Zalani ships remained at the edge of the solar system, watching what they believed were primitive icebreakers struggling to survive on a frozen world. They had no idea that they were actually observing one of the most industrious species in the galaxy, creatures who saw obstacles like planetary ice sheets as minor inconveniences to be removed with casual efficiency. As the Earth turned and the Arctic dawn continued its work, neither the human miners nor the alien observers realized that they were about to become part of something much larger than anyone could imagine. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in her office at the International Mining Consortium headquarters in Colorado. The morning coffee had gone cold as she stared at the computer screen showing satellite data from the Arctic operations. Something was wrong with the readings. There were strange electromagnetic signals coming from space that she had never seen before. She picked up her phone and called NASA's contact division. "Colonel Hayes, this is Elena Rodriguez. I need to show you something unusual, Colonel." Rick Hayes was a busy man who dealt with space junk and satellite problems every day. "What kind of unusual, Doctor?" "The kind that doesn't come from any human technology I know about," Elena replied. "Can you meet me at the lab this afternoon?" Rick sighed. Scientists were always finding strange signals that turned out to be broken, satellites or solar interference. "I'll be there at 3. Meanwhile, far above Earth, Commander Vextar was becoming more interested in the third planet. The ice-breaking operations were much larger than his initial scans had shown. His science. Officer Telana had been watching the vessels for 3 days straight. "Sir, these ice miners are working around the clock," she reported. "They never stop. The energy they are using to melt the ice is enormous." Vextar studied the new data. "How enormous?" "Enough to power a small city, sir. And they have multiple operations running at the same time across their northern ice regions." This was unusual. Most ice world species could only manage small operations because of limited energy. These creatures seem to have solved their power problems in a big way. Perhaps they have learned to use geothermal energy from their planet's core, Vextar suggested. "Some advanced ice world species discover this technique." Telana nodded. "That would explain the power levels. They are much more sophisticated than we first thought." Back on Earth, Captain Jake Morrison was dealing with a different kind of problem. The mining platform Arctic Dawn had broken through the ice faster than expected and found something incredible underneath. "Captain, you need to see this," Sam Carter called from the geology station. "The mineral deposits go deeper than our equipment can measure. This isn't just a pocket of rare metals. It's like someone dumped a whole asteroid down here." Jake looked at the scan results. The readings showed massive amounts of materials that were usually very hard to find on Earth. "How is that possible?" "Maybe an asteroid hit here millions of years ago," Sam suggested. "The impact buried all these materials under layers of ice and rock." Lisa Park joined them at the screen. "If this is true, we're looking at enough resources to supply the world's technology needs for decades." Jake grabbed the radio to call headquarters. "Arctic base to Denver. We need to expand operations immediately. What we found here is bigger than anything we've seen before." At the Colorado headquarters, Elena Rodriguez was showing Colonel Rick Hayes the electromagnetic data on her computer. The patterns were too organized to be natural, but they didn't match any known human satellites or space missions. "These signals are coming from somewhere beyond the moon," she explained. "They've been getting stronger for the past week." Rick studied the data carefully. He had seen many false alarms, but this looked different. "Have you checked with other observatories?" "I called observatories in Australia and Chile. They're seeing the same patterns," Elena said. "Rick, I think someone is watching us." Before Rick could respond, Elena's phone rang. It was Jake Morrison calling from the Arctic. "Elena, we need every mining platform you can send us," Jake said excitedly. What we found here is unbelievable. The deposits are massive. How massive? Elena asked. Big enough to change everything. We need the heavy equipment from the Canadian operations and the deep drilling rigs from Alaska. Elena looked at Rick, who was still studying the space signals. Jake, we might have other problems to worry about. There are strange signals coming from space. Space signals? Jake laughed. Elena, I'm standing on top of the biggest mineral discovery in human history. Unless aliens are coming to steal our mining equipment, I think we should focus on the job. Up in the Zalani ships, Commander Vextar was watching the human operations expand. More vessels were arriving at the ice-breaking sites. Larger machines were being brought in. The scale of the operation was growing beyond anything he had seen. From an ice world species. Tilana, are you certain these are just ice miners? He asked. His science officer checked her instruments again. The energy signatures are consistent with ice melting operations, sir, but the scale is unprecedented. They are moving equipment that weighs thousands of tons across the ice. Maybe they have discovered something valuable under the ice, Vextar suggested. Some ice worlds have valuable minerals trapped beneath the frozen surface. That would explain the expansion, Tilana agreed. They may have found a rich deposit that requires larger extraction operations. Vextar updated his report to the Galactic Council. The ice world species was more resourceful than initially assessed. They had developed impressive technology for ice mining and mineral extraction. However, they were still classified as Tier 7. Advanced ice miners were not uncommon in the galaxy. Back on Earth, more mining equipment was arriving at the Arctic sites every day. Captain Jake Morrison now commanded a fleet of 12 platforms, each one larger than the Arctic Dawn. The operation had grown from a simple mining mission to the biggest industrial project in the Arctic. Lisa, how much ice are we melting per day? Jake asked. About 10 million tons, she replied. The thermal systems are running at full capacity. Sam Carter was amazed by the geological data. Captain, we're not just finding rare metals. There are elements here that shouldn't exist in normal planetary formation. This has to be from an asteroid impact. The mining operation continued to expand. More ships arrived with bigger machines. The ice that had covered the mineral deposits for thousands of years was disappearing rapidly. Steam clouds from the melting ice could be seen from satellite images. Colonel Rick Hayes returned to NASA with Elena's data about the space signals. He was starting to believe that something was really watching Earth. The signals were too organized and too persistent to be natural phenomena. We need to prepare first contact protocols, he told his team. If someone is out there watching us, they might try to make contact soon. High above, Commander Vextar watched the expanding mining operations with growing curiosity. These ice miners were becoming more interesting every day. Their industrial capabilities were impressive for a primitive species. Soon, he would need to file a more detailed report with the Galactic Council. Admiral Kate Sullivan floated in the zero-gravity command center of the orbital station Titan's Reach. Through the massive windows, she could see 3 small asteroids slowly spinning as they were held in place by powerful magnetic fields. Each asteroid was about the size of a city block, and robotic mining ships swarmed around them like metal insects. Status report on the Deep Space Mining Initiative, she called to her operations officer. All 3 asteroids are on schedule for processing, Admiral. Lieutenant Commander Tony Webb replied. The automated systems are extracting materials at record rates. Kate smiled as she watched the mining operation. What had started as a simple experiment had become humanity's most successful space project. They were pulling more rare metals from these 3 rocks than all the Earth-based mines combined. Far below on the planet's surface, Captain Jake Morrison received a message that made him stop his work. Director Elena Rodriguez was calling with new orders. Jake, we're expanding operations beyond anything we've done before, Elena said over the radio. The space-based mining is so successful that we need to increase Earth operations to match. How much expansion? Jake asked. Triple your current operation. We're sending you the mining ship Iron Mountain and 15 new platforms. Jake looked out at the Arctic landscape where his crews had already melted through miles of ice. Elena, we're already processing more ice than anyone thought possible. Are you sure about this? The demand for materials is unlimited, Jake. The space operations are showing us what's possible when we really try. High above Earth, Commander Vexistar was staring at his instruments in confusion. His sensors were detecting something that made no sense. The ice-breaking operations on the planet's surface were connected to activities in space. Talana, run the scans again, he ordered. There must be an error. Dr. Talana checked her equipment 3 times before responding. Sir, the readings are correct. The ice mining species has vessels operating in their planet's orbital space. That's impossible, Vexitar said. Ice world species don't develop space travel while they're still breaking through surface ice for survival. Talana pointed to her screen. Sir, they're not just in orbit. They're processing large chunks of space rock. The energy signatures are enormous. Vextar felt a cold fear growing in his stomach. Show me the orbital operations. The main screen displayed what the sensors were detecting around the 3rd planet. 3 large objects were being systematically torn apart by smaller vessels. The energy being used was staggering. Those aren't space rocks, Vextar whispered. Those are asteroids. They're mining asteroids. Talana's 4 eyes went wide. Sir, that's impossible. Only advanced civilizations can capture and mine asteroids. These are supposed to be primitive icebreakers. Vextar began pulling up all their data from the past week. The ice-breaking operations, the massive energy usage, the expanding fleet of vessels. Everything suddenly looked different when viewed with new understanding. They're not breaking ice to find water, he said slowly. They're mining their planet's surface for materials. But sir, the ice is just in their way, Vextar interrupted. They remove it like we would clear space debris. It's not about survival, it's about extraction. On the orbital station Titan's Reach, Admiral Kate Sullivan was receiving reports from Captain Ben Torres, who commanded the massive industrial ship Iron Mountain. The ship was as large as an aircraft carrier and packed with mining equipment. Admiral, we're ready to begin the next phase, Captain Torres reported. The asteroid belt operations can start whenever you give the word, Kate nodded. Approved, Captain. Take your fleet to Ceres and begin systematic harvesting of the asteroid belt. Understood, Admiral. The Iron Mountain, Mountain Breaker, and Forge of Sol are ready for deep space operations. Kate watched as the 3 massive ships fired their engines and began the journey to the asteroid belt. Each ship carried enough equipment to strip mine an entire moon. Their mission was to begin humanity's expansion into the solar system's richest source of raw materials. Back in the Zilani fleet, Commander Vexistar was frantically recalculating everything they knew about the species on the 3rd planet. The more he learned, the more terrified he became. Talana, what is the total energy output of all their operations combined? Sir, they're using more energy for mining than our entire fleet uses for life support, propulsion, and weapons combined. And they're doing this casually? Yes, sir. The operations appear to be routine industrial activity for them. Vexitar sat down heavily in his command chair. We haven't discovered an ice world species. We've found something else entirely. What do you mean, sir? Think about it, Talana. A species that can capture asteroids, mine them efficiently, and simultaneously strip mine their own planet's surface isn't struggling to survive. They're not primitive icebreakers. They're industrial processors on a planetary scale. Talana looked at the data again with this new understanding. Sir, if they can do this to asteroids and ice sheets, what could they do to inhabited planets? I don't want to think about it, Vextar replied. But we need to inform the Galactic Council immediately. Our classification of this species is dangerously wrong. On Earth, Captain Jake Morrison was supervising the arrival of the Iron Mountain's ground support equipment. The new mining platforms were 3 times larger than anything he had worked with before. Each one could melt through ice faster than his entire original fleet. Captain Morrison, this is Captain Torres from the Iron Mountain, came a voice on the radio. We're heading to deep space operations, but we're leaving you enough equipment to process half the Arctic if needed. Jake laughed. Captain Torres, at the rate we're going, we might need it all. Roger that. The asteroid belt has enough materials to keep us busy for centuries, so don't worry about running out of work. As Jake watched the massive mining ships disappear into the distance, he had no idea that aliens in space were having nightmares about his species. To him, This was just another day of efficient resource extraction. To the Zilani, it was the discovery of the most terrifying industrial civilization they had ever encountered. Commander Vexitar began composing an urgent message to the Galactic Council. The subject line read, "Immediate threat assessment required. Tier 7. Classification completely incorrect." He paused before sending it, knowing that this message would change everything. The galaxy thought it was dealing with primitive ice miners. Instead, they had discovered a species that treated planetary destruction as routine industrial work. The emergency council meeting on the Zilani flagship had been going on for 6 hours. Commander Vextar stood before the holographic images of 12 other fleet commanders, all of them staring at the data he had presented. The silence in the yaw room was heavy with fear. "You're telling us that the primitive ice miners have a fleet of over 300 vessels?" asked Fleet Commander Zareth from the Outer Rim Patrol. "That's correct," Vextar replied. "And that's just what we can detect. With our current sensors, there may be more." Dr. Talana activated the main display screen. "The species we classified as Tier 7 ice world dwellers has mining operations on 17 different locations across their planet. They also have permanent installations in their planet's orbital space and are now expanding into their system's asteroid field." Commander Naltara from the Science Division leaned forward. "Show us the asteroid field operations." The screen changed to show Captain Ben Torres's mining fleet approaching Ceres, the largest asteroid in the belt. The Iron Mountain and its support ships looked tiny next to the massive space rock, but their energy signatures were incredible. "They're going to mine the entire asteroid?" Naltara asked in disbelief. "According to their communication patterns, yes," Talana replied. "They refer to it as systematic harvesting of the belt." Captain Torres was having the time of his life. The Iron Mountain had reached Ceres after a 3-day journey, and the asteroid was even richer in materials than Earth's surveys had predicted. His crew was setting up the massive mining equipment that would tear the space rock apart piece by piece. "Captain Chen, position the mountain breaker on the north face," he ordered. "Captain Murphy, take the Forge of Sol to the processing position." "Captain," Amy Chen acknowledged from her mining vessel. "Roger that, Ben. The thermal lances are charging up. We should be able to start cutting within the hour." Captain Dan Murphy's processing ship was already extending its collection arms. Forge of Sol ready to receive materials. The refineries are operating at full capacity. Back on the Zilani flagship, the emergency council was trying to understand what they were seeing. The human mining operation was using more energy than some small planets produced. The casual efficiency of the operation was terrifying. "How long would it take them to completely mine that asteroid?" asked Commander Kexara. Talana ran the calculations. "At their current rate, approximately 4 months. Then they will move to the next asteroid." "And how many asteroids are in that belt?" "Over 1 million objects larger than 1 kilometer. Millions more smaller ones." The silence returned to the council chamber. Every commander was thinking the same thing. A species that could consume an entire asteroid belt had capabilities beyond anything in the known galaxy. On Earth, Director Elena Rodriguez was finally taking the space signals seriously. Colonel Rick Hayes had convinced NASA to form a special task force to investigate the electromagnetic patterns. They had been monitoring the signals for 2 weeks, and the patterns were definitely artificial. "The signals are getting stronger," Elena told Rick as they studied the latest data. "Whatever is sending them is getting closer to Earth." "Or there are more of them," Rick suggested. "The patterns show at least 12 different signal sources." Elena felt a chill. "You think there's a fleet of ships out there?" "I think we need to be prepared for contact," Rick replied. "I've already started briefing the President's science advisors." In the asteroid belt, Captain Torres was watching his mining crews work with professional satisfaction. The thermal lances were cutting through Ceres like hot knives through butter. Chunks of rock the size of buildings were being broken off and fed into the processing systems. "How much material are we extracting per hour?" he asked his operations officer. "About 50,000 tons, sir. The refineries are separating out rare metals, water ice, and basic construction materials." Torres nodded. At this rate, we'll have enough raw materials to build a dozen new orbital stations. He had no idea that aliens were watching his operation, with growing horror. To Torres, this was just efficient resource management. To the Zilani, it was watching apex predators in their natural habitat. Commander Vextar was preparing his final report to the Galactic Council. Everything the Zilani had observed about humanity pointed to one terrifying conclusion. This was not a primitive species struggling to survive on an ice world. This was something far more dangerous. Telana, what's the total scope of their operations? Sir, they have active mining on their home planet, 3 orbital facilities, and now deep space operations. The energy output suggests they could expand these operations by a factor of 10 if needed. And their technology level? Much higher than we initially assessed. They're using fusion power, advanced materials processing, and automated mining systems that rival our own industrial capabilities. Vextar composed his message to the Galactic Council. Priority 1 alert. Species designation requires immediate reclassification. The inhabitants of the 3rd planet are not primitive ice miners. They are an industrial civilization with planetary-scale resource extraction capabilities. They demonstrate casual efficiency in operations that would challenge most advanced species. Recommend immediate strategic assessment. Before he could send the message, the sensor alarm went off. Telana was staring at her instruments with wide eyes. Sir, we have a problem. The humans have detected us. What do you mean? Their deep space mining fleet has changed course. They're heading in our direction. On the Iron Mountain, Captain Torres was studying the sensor readings with interest. There's definitely something out there. The electromagnetic signatures don't match any known natural phenomena. Captain Chen's voice came over the radio. Ben, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Those look like artificial constructs. That's what I'm thinking too, Amy. Should we investigate? Admiral Sullivan wants us to maintain mining operations, but she also said to report anything unusual. Torres made his decision. We're going to take a closer look. If there's someone out there watching us, we should probably say hello. Commander, Vextar watched in horror as the human mining fleet adjusted course toward the Zilani observation post. The massive industrial ships that had been casually dismantling an asteroid were now heading directly toward them. Sir, what are your orders? Telana asked. Vextar looked at the approaching ships and realized that first contact was no longer a question of if, but when. The species that treated planetary destruction as routine work was coming to meet them. Prepare for contact, he said, quietly. And pray to the void that they're as reasonable as they are terrifying. The mining fleet continued its approach, carrying crews who were simply curious about their new neighbors, completely unaware that their reputation as cosmic destroyers had preceded them across the galaxy. Director Elena Rodriguez stood in the NASA Contact Division Command Center, watching dozens of screens showing data from around the world. The electromagnetic signals from space had suddenly changed pattern 3 hours ago. Now every radio telescope on Earth was pointed at the same spot in space. Colonel Hayes, the signals are definitely coming from ships, she said. Our best estimate is 12 vessels holding position just outside the asteroid belt. Colonel Rick, Hayes was coordinating with military commanders around the globe. The president has been briefed. We're implementing first contact protocols as of now. What's the status of our people in space? Admiral Sullivan's mining fleet is approaching. The signal source. Captain Torres volunteered his ships to make first contact. Elena felt nervous and excited at the same time. Humanity was about to meet aliens for the first time, and it was happening because of a mining operation. Captain Ben Torres stood on the bridge of the Iron Mountain, watching the alien ships grow larger on his screens. His mining fleet of 3 massive vessels was approaching slowly, with all weapon systems powered down to show peaceful intentions. Captain Chen, are you getting clear images of their ships? He asked over the radio. Captain Amy Chen's voice crackled back from the mountain breaker. Affirmative, Ben. 12 vessels unlike any design I've ever seen. They're beautiful, actually. Captain Dan Murphy added from the Forge of Soul. Their technology looks advanced. The hull materials are reflecting our scanner beams in strange ways. Torres nodded. Remember, we're here as representatives of humanity. Let's make a good first impression. On the Zilani flagship, Commander Vextar was having the worst day of his military career. The human industrial ships were now close enough that he could see their massive mining equipment and processing facilities. Each ship was larger than a Zilani battlecruiser and covered in machinery designed to tear apart planets. "Sir, they're transmitting on multiple frequencies," Telana reported. "It appears to be some kind of greeting. Can you translate it?" "The universal translator is working on it. They seem to be trying to establish peaceful communication." Vextar almost laughed at the irony. The most terrifying species he had ever encountered was trying to be friendly. Back on Earth, Captain Jake Morrison was still running mining operations in the Arctic when he received the news. He was melting through his biggest ice sheet yet when Elena Rodriguez called him directly. "Jake, you're not going to believe this. We're in contact with aliens." Jake paused his work and looked up at the stars. "Are you serious, Elena?" "Dead serious. They've been watching our mining operations for weeks. Apparently, they thought we were primitive ice miners struggling to survive." Jake burst out laughing. "Ice miners? Elena, we're running the biggest industrial operation in human history up here. How could they think we're primitive?" "That's exactly the point, Jake. What we consider normal industrial work, they consider impossible for a primitive species. In space, the first actual communication between humans and aliens was about to begin. Captain Torres had established a clear communication channel with the alien fleet. "This is Captain Ben Torres of the human vessel Iron Mountain. We come in peace and friendship." Commander Vextar responded carefully. "This is Commander Vextar of the Zilani Observation Fleet. We have been monitoring your world. We figured that out from your electromagnetic signals." Torres replied cheerfully. "Are you interested in establishing formal relations between our species?" Vextar was amazed by the casual tone. These creatures who could destroy planets were talking like they were neighbors meeting for the first time. "Captain Torres, may I ask about your current operations?" "Of course. We're conducting systematic resource extraction from the asteroid belt. Standard mining operations." "Standard?" Vextar couldn't hide his shock. "Well, it's new for us to work this far from Earth, but the principles are the same. We extract raw materials, process them, and ship them back to where they're needed." Telana whispered to her commander. "Sir, they think planetary-scale resource extraction is normal." Dr. Telana activated her own communication system. "Captain Torres, this is Dr. Telana, Science Officer. May I ask how long your species has been capable of asteroid mining?" "About 6 months for the deep space operations," Torres replied. "But we've been mining Earth for thousands of years. We just got better equipment recently." The Zilani science officer felt faint. "You've been mining your entire planet for thousands of years?" "Sure. How else would we get the materials we need for civilization? You have to extract resources to build things." Admiral Kate Sullivan joined the conversation from the orbital station Titan's Reach. "This is Admiral Sullivan, commanding the Deep Space Mining Initiative. Commander Vextar, we're honored to meet representatives of another intelligent species." "Admiral Sullivan, may I ask about the scope of your mining operations?" "Currently, we have operations on 17 sites on Earth, 3 orbital processing stations, and now the Asteroid Belt Project. We're planning to expand to the outer system moons next year." Vextar realized that what the humans considered expansion, plans would be enough to supply the entire Zilani civilization for centuries. "Commander Vextar, do your people need any raw materials?" Torres asked helpfully. "We're extracting more than we can use right now." The offer was so casual and friendly that Vextar didn't know how to respond. The species that could strip mine planets was offering to share resources with strangers. "That's very generous," he managed to say. Back on Earth, Elena Rodriguez was coordinating with world leaders about humanity's first contact with aliens. The aliens seemed peaceful and were clearly advanced, but they also seemed strangely nervous about human industrial capabilities. Colonel Hayes was reading the initial contact reports. "Elena, according to the transcripts, they're amazed by our mining operations. Why would advanced aliens be impressed by mining? Maybe they don't have the same industrial capabilities we do, or maybe they think we're more advanced than we actually are. In the Arctic, Captain Jake Morrison was listening to the radio chatter about first contact while his crews continued melting through the ice. The work never stopped, even for historic moments. Captain Morrison, this is Torres in space. The aliens want to know if all human operations are as large-scale as what they've observed. Jake looked around at his massive mining platforms, the melted ice lakes and the mountains of extracted materials. Tell them this is pretty normal for us. We like to do things efficiently. The conversation between humans and aliens continued for hours. The Zilani learned that humans considered planetary-scale resource extraction to be routine industrial work. The humans learned that they had accidentally terrified an advanced alien civilization by doing what came naturally to them. Commander Vextar finally understood the truth. Humanity wasn't a primitive species or an advanced threat. They were something completely different. They were a species that had turned resource extraction into an art form, and they did it with the casual efficiency that other species reserved for simple tasks. As the first day of contact ended, both species realized they had a lot to learn from each other. The aliens had advanced technology and knowledge of the galaxy. The humans had industrial capabilities that defied galactic standards. Captain Jake Morrison, still breaking through Arctic ice, received word that humanity had made friends with aliens and that they were interested in human mining techniques. His response was typically human. Great. Do they know any good places to find rare metals?